Howard University School of Law, FirstRepair, the African American Redress Network, the Pittsburgh Center for Civil Rights and Racial Justice, the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs, and the University of Pittsburgh have all collaborated to bring us here this evening for this very important discussion that sits at the intersection of international human rights law, movement advocacy, and scholarship. It's not all the time that we get a chance to do something that we know that our ancestors would be very proud of. So I'm very excited to be a part of this discussion and to build this case for reparations. Now, as an attorney, I can tell you a legal case has several stages. Beginning with the claim of harm, then we analyze the evidence, then that leads to a verdict, which then results in a proper remedy, and then forcing the wrongdoer to pay. In this process, every stage is key. Every stage must be completed with thoroughness and professionalism. If reparations is the remedy we seek to repair the harm committed again and again against Black communities by colonial and exploitative actors, then we must gain more and more evidence. We must analyze it with thoroughness and professionalism so that we can get to a verdict that will endure for decades to come. In our case, the tribunal may indeed be the court of public opinion, or it may be a UN tribunal that the Permanent Forum may request in the coming years to come. But in any event, getting to that final stage will require all of us to work together. Some of you may have heard yesterday I made an appeal to create a bar association for reparations, which will include not only attorneys, but also anyone who is passionate about justice and the case for reparations. So I hope you will join us in the creation of that. Now, each of the groups you will hear from tonight has dedicated themselves to the work that will be making this case for us. And tonight they will share both their processes and their results. We hope that you won't just applaud their effort, but copy it. Imitation is the highest form of flattery, and viable claims for reparations are all around us. And the words of my student Shakira, who loves saying this, everybody can get this work. Everybody can get this work. Black communities don't need platitudes or piecemeal solutions. We need holistic reparations. We need our communities to be made whole. Through this work, we hope to begin that process of getting what is ours. I've worked in collaboration with each of the organizations that will be presenting here tonight. I'm very proud of the work done, especially by Howard University law students. Let's give them a hand. There's one here,
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. It is such a privilege and a joy to be here, to be part of this collective and global effort to dismantle systems of racism and oppression, and I'm so thrilled to see such a great audience here. I'm grateful to the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent for providing the forum for collaboration and for their leadership in efforts to eradicate racial injustice. And I would like to thank tonight's events organizers. FirstRepair, the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center at the Howard University School of Law, Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs, and the African American Redress Network for putting this panel together. And thank you to all of you for your participation and presence. As Director Hansford noted, I serve as Dean of the David C. Frederick Honors College at the University of Pittsburgh. And before I introduce tonight's panelists, I want to briefly emphasize why tonight's event, introducing this collaborative work on U.S. reparations, is so important from the perspective of honors education in the United States, and give some context into how all of this fits with our work at the University of Pittsburgh. At the David C. Frederick Honors College, we see honors education as central to achieving social justice at the national and global level. And this often surprises people. Honors education is sometimes has a bad reputation as being elitist and exclusionary. But at its foundation, honors education is a way of offering the transformative interdisciplinary education that's available in highly selective liberal arts institutions in public universities at an affordable cost. But inclusivity and justice have to be intentionally centered in honors education for that promise to be manifested, both by actively recruiting students from the widest range of backgrounds and by ensuring that racial justice and equity are centered within the curriculum and programming that is provided. And at Frederick, we're doing this in a number of ways that you'll be hearing about. Under the leadership of Ron Adoko, who's somewhere here, I think I see him at the back, we've established an Office of Social Innovation in Honors Education, which is really serving as a national leader for creating spaces for students across different disciplines to come together and solve social problems actively. And in particular, that research, the Social Innovation Office is creating a research hub that is finding ways for students across different disciplinary fields to engage in research on anti-racism and find active solutions. And to give you an example, we have a student who's won a prize for her work on finding solutions to anti-racist pedagogy in psychology classrooms. We've got another student who's a neuroscientist who's creating a children's book, so really coming out of their fields. We're also using writers in residence, artists in residence to create spaces for equity-focused creativity. And as we build our global programs centering racial equity with work in the Caribbean and South America, and doing service learning programs in high-income countries, not developing ones, and using our programs in places like London and Paris to focus on colonialism and to think about reparations. I also want to highlight the work that our Director of National Scholarships, Leisha Green, is doing. She's in the audience here. In two areas in particular. One is what we call our Chancellor's Plus program, which is bringing our merit scholars and our access scholarships into collaboration in a single cohort and putting them on a path to winning nationally competitive fellowships like the Rhodes. Thank you. It really is important work. And also expanding the work that we do in national scholarships to focus on awards like the Gilman and the Soros Scholars Award that are specifically focused on, for example, low-income students, first-generation immigrant students. And we got our first Soros awardee this year, which was really exciting. And also trying to use that to build networks of honors educators nationally through our participation and leadership in the Justice and Equity Honors Network. And in this work, we are anchored in the extraordinary and deep commitment that the University of Pittsburgh is showing to support work that supports transformative systemic social change. While many universities put out statements in the summer of 2020, at Pitt we moved firmly into action. We introduced a one-credit course on anti-Black racism that is required for all students at Pitt. And we also created, under the leadership again of Ron Adoko, who you'll be meeting, the Racial Equity Consciousness Institute that provides training for all faculty, students, and staff, and empowers them to find solutions to racism. But it's not enough just to create spaces to learn. We have to engage and act and lead. And this is why the focus on reparations and the inclusion of talented undergraduates from all disciplinary fields is so critical. And I really want to highlight how powerful it is that we at the University of Pittsburgh, a public university in a swing state, are engaging in this work and that we have support to do that. I spent most of my career at a public university in Florida where now literally having discussions of reparations with students would be illegal under the new laws that are passed. Our first panelist is FirstRepair. FirstRepair was founded by Robin Rue Simmons, a former Evanston, Illinois alderman, and the architect of the nation's first government-funded reparations program in the U.S. Robin's solutions-only leadership style has inspired the services of FirstRepair, including sharing best practices, creating tools, and developing a viable model to advance local reparations policy. Their knowledge network is extraordinary and includes seasoned experts and social innovators with a proven commitment to reparations, racial justice, and the Black community empowerment.
Thank you all for coming after a long, incredible, virtuous day at the second convening. Professor Hansford, I don't know if you're in the room, but thank you for your leadership, you and your colleagues on the Permanent Forum. Thank you for making these convenings possible. I'm Robin from FirstRepair, and when I was a councilwoman some years ago, my work evolved to reparations are necessary for the crimes and harms against my own community, and called the question in 2019 for reparations, and we successfully passed that, have since funded, have since dispersed, have since increased the budget by an additional $10 million, and the work continues. And so that's what birthed FirstRepair. And at FirstRepair, we are able to work with other communities, individual leaders, institutions to learn and share best practices. We're so honored to do it, incredibly honored now to do it in an international community that we find so much strength and fuel from. So thank you for the way that we have been embracing international spaces, but do look to us as a collaborator, as a thought partner, as a friend and resource as you are advancing local reparations. We have supported many communities. We have a presentation board that's outside. I hope that you take time to review it and see some of our work. We have other programs and services which I'm going to let my brilliant colleagues, Kiara Abrams and Elisa Walker, share more about. But I will be here and I would love to meet each of you before the night is over. Forever Forward, Reparations Now.
Hello everyone, my name is Kiara Abrams and I'm from Evanston, Illinois, and I work at FirstRepair in Evanston, Illinois. We are happy to be here with you all today. I will speak about our reparations strategy session. That is one of our programs at FirstRepair. So the reparations strategy session aims to support and expand the work of local and municipal reparations activists. Together, we are creating a new broad consensus around racial redress and securing reparations across the country. We host these sessions in conjunction with the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center, African American Redress Network, and International Center for Transitional Justice. Each month, we invite guests and speakers, and we bring together over 100 leaders from different regions to discuss reparations. We have an intimate Q&A session for attendees to get more insight on various topics. This month, our guest speakers were Nikiji Taifa in the back there. Thank you. Yes, please give her a round of applause. She was great. And Dr. Cheryl Grills, they both spoke on where we are now in the movement. In the next few months, we will have speakers such as Trevor Smith. He is here in the back as well. We will have Brian Fest, Cam Howard, and Linda Mann. These sessions allow individuals to speak about the advancement of reparations and come up with their own initiatives, toolkits, and frameworks. Collaboration in the reparations movement is important in coming together with different organizations and individuals to share experiences. We invite you all to join us at our monthly reparations strategy session that takes place on every fourth Thursday of each month from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. We have these small flyers. They're double-sided outside on our table, and you can find out more information on the flyer, as well as please visit and register for those sessions at our website, firstrepair.org. Thank you all. Have a great day.
Hi everyone, my name is Elisa Walker. I'm an incoming third year at Hampton University. I'm an international studies major, and I'm a special assistant at FirstRepair. So as Robin said, when she was an alderman, she decided that Evanston needed reparations. So how did we identify our needs, and how can you identify your needs in your communities? So far, there are 5 forms of repair. There's restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, compensation, and cessation. So how did we decide what exactly Evanston needed? Well, we hosted town halls and asked our community, our Black community specifically, what exactly do we need? What are we lacking? What could we use funding for? And a common statement was housing. So we decided to start creating a program that helped keep Black ownership in Evanston. So the housing reparations that we have were created to increase ownership in Evanston, Illinois for Black Americans, and build intergenerational equity amongst Black and African Americans in Evanston, improve retention rate in Evanston because we did see a lot of our Black population was leaving, and lastly, revitalize, preserve, and stabilize Black and African American ownership in Evanston. So that's exactly what worked best for us specifically. In your communities, we think the best way to do that is to speak with your Black elders. Ask them, what are they missing? What different traumas did they go through while they lived in that community? What type of discrimination did they face? And depending on what their answer is, try to remedy that, try to find different ways to repair that. A great way to figure out what to do, where to start, would be definitely coming to our monthly reparation sessions, because there's people from all over the country that have the opportunity just to talk, brainstorm, build toolkits, and just roadmaps on how to start their own programs in their own communities. So there's definitely a community out there to help you out, and reach out to us anytime. We would love to help you build your own reparations initiatives in your community. Thank you very much.
My name is Shakira Irvin, and I've been a part of the Black Audit Project in several capacities at Howard University School of Law. I began in the fall of 2022 as a student, conducting a study into Black Pittsburgh. After an illuminating investigation informed what shape this project should take, I started to coordinate and support other students as they planned and organized audits on their cities. I want to inform you on the takeaways from recent efforts that we have done in Puerto Rico, and allow Leighton, who has done some work in the community of Dayton, Ohio. But first, I want to share a little bit more about what the Black Audit Project is and what we try to do. We are using the UN's Sustainable Development Goals to attempt to disaggregate the data on the Black communities. We are documenting harms, we are collecting evidence, and we are helping to try to build local coalitions capable of building power necessary to take the next support and successful claims that may lead to reparations, but we respect the self-determination of these communities and allow them to do with the data for what purposes they would like to use them for, which can take many different advocacy forms. And each project consists of two equal but very, very important parts and roles, which requires the student doing the investigation to become both a legal researcher and writer, but also to be a organizer, building power in the community. And we do this by asking for input and taking testimony in the form of town halls, doing visits, documenting harms and ride-alongs, so that each community tells us what is important and what is going on. So the project in Puerto Rico, which we did earlier this month, we visited predominantly the Afro-descendant communities of Luisa, Peones, Salinas, and Las Carreras to even begin to understand what is going on with the human rights of the Afro-descendant community in Puerto Rico. You first have to have an understanding of how much erasure has been done to the identity of Afro-descendants in Puerto Rico, and how that has prevented any type of advocacy efforts, making it very difficult for the very vigilantly organized community there. Puerto Rico has been successful in forging a national identity that acknowledges while everyone may have a black grandmother somewhere, does not acknowledge that people are Afro-descendant instead of categorizing them all as Puerto Ricans. But what that does to the community is makes it very difficult to document harms and to track discrimination. There are no tracking of race and vital statistics like birth and death certificates. So, and until 1990, there was no way to track it even on the census. The first census question, which asked people to identify themselves as Afro-descendants, came about in 1990. And so the process is still very much a self-selective process. Some of the important harms that they shared with us were harms related to housing, which were very multi-level harms done not only through some of the last few hurricanes like Maria, that, by the way, the FEMA is still not supporting the rehabilitation of housing. When one community that we visited, people were still covering the roofs damaged by Maria with blue tarps, and the first roof to arrive to be installed to repair that harm from FEMA happened during our visit earlier this month. The issues with housing are also exacerbated by the systems and property laws and traditions that does not recognize that traditionally property has not always been recorded at the city level. It was exchanged between family members, allowing certain companies and developers to claim property without contacting the family and the descendants that have had that property, and it is displacing many people around the island. So even though there are so many more harms, I want to leave time for my colleague Leighton to also tell us what's going on in the city of Dayton. Thank you.
Former student attorney with Professor Hansford Movement Lawyering Clinic, where I was able to work on the Dayton SDG project. Now, before I started on this project, I didn't realize how difficult things were in Dayton for the Black population. Dayton is actually the 15th most segregated city in the US. And if you look at a map of Dayton, what's happening is there's a body of water that runs through the middle of the city. And you can effectively separate the Black population from the left to the right side of the Miami Valley River. Now, this dates back to a report that Congress published that led to a lot of redlining, essentially pushing the Black population to one side of the city. And so this has been going on for generations and generations, and I'll get into that a little bit. But what this means for now is that when resources are allocated disproportionately, because the city is so segregated, the effects of limiting resources to one area is highly racialized. Now, fortunately, Dayton has a really powerful network of community leaders who are aware. They're very committed to documenting these harms and bringing attention to what's happening and encouraging a lot of civil action and change. Actually, 2 of the young leaders from Dayton are here in the back with us. If you guys want to raise your hand or stand up, they were wonderful. Thank you guys for coming. Now, this community network, they were very diligent in, as I said, documenting, but also informing me of the sustainable development goals they were most concerned with, which effectively boiled down to housing, education, healthcare, policing and incarceration, and access to food. One of the first things that I heard about when I got to Dayton for the town hall was the closing of Good Samaritan Hospital. In 2018, the only hospital with an emergency medical center that was in Black Dayton was closed down. The time to get from the Black neighborhoods on the left side of the city to the Miami Valley Hospital is about 35 to 40 minutes in an ambulance. And the people of Dayton, they pushed really hard not to have that hospital close. They filed a civil rights action in the federal court, and unfortunately it was still closed down. Since then, they have documented people who've passed away who should not have, because it shouldn't take 35 or 40 minutes to get to a hospital when you're in a medical crisis. Now, to add insult to injury, the city of Dayton has declared that a loss, taken the tax money and reallocated it. Unfortunately, not to the area that they took the hospital from. Instead, they have opened a couple medical clinics that don't have any sort of emergency medical centers or any maternal health centers, and a YMCA to promote well-being. Another sustainable development goal that was a focus for community members was zero hunger. Similarly to there being no emergency medical center, there are also no grocery stores in West Dayton, which is the area that I was referring to. Now recently, about 3 years ago, the community came together to establish Gem City Market, which is a co-op. And that is now the main source for fresh, healthy food in the city. However, one grocery store is not enough. And quite frankly, it's disgraceful that there aren't any more. But it does speak to the power of the community and the attention that they have to what's going on. The last goal I'll speak to that Dayton community members were concerned with was Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. Now, I was referring to this report earlier, Congress's Homeowners Loan Corporation Residential Security Map. What that did was it lauded Dayton's good transportation in schools, but warned of a certain neighborhoods having, quote, an infiltration of Negroes. That led to a prediction of a downward trend in desirability, which actively encouraged lenders, investors, home buyers, and the city to disinvest in Black areas. So now, when you drive through these Black neighborhoods, many of the houses are dilapidated. A bunch of the houses have been reduced to piles of burned debris. A lot of the Black middle class who did live in the area when there was more industry have fled because there's really not much opportunity. And to make matters worse, banks and mortgages don't market conventional home loans to purchase homes valued at less than $75,000. And since the median home value in Southern Dayton View is around $50,000, it makes it nearly impossible for people who want to live in the area, buy a home in the area, to be able to do that with a traditional home loan. And then to add to that, since property taxes serve as funding for public necessities such as schools, housing discrimination and segregation in Dayton is essentially leading to this predatory cycle, which is squandering any opportunity for the community to really reinvest in itself. I took into consideration all 17 of the SDGs. Part of the assignment for the report was to give the city of Dayton a grade. I gave the city of Dayton a D. It would have probably failed
if not for having a really strong network of community members who are focused on the issues. They pulled us in, honestly. They sought us out. They're interested in making Dayton a human rights city. They're interested in making sure that their harms are being documented at this level. So I'm looking forward to see what's possible with Dayton and the documentation they have and how that might lead to reparations sometime in the future.
Good evening. My name is Gabby Yearwood. I'm the Managing Faculty Director for the Center for Civil Rights and Racial Justice at the University of Pittsburgh School of Law. And so we've brought together community leaders, community scholars, university scholars, and students as a way to share knowledge and expertise in action, and to bring together these folks to develop new strategies and new forms of knowledge. And so one of the ways in which we do that is through our American Apartheid series, where we recognize that Pittsburgh is not America's most livable city. You may often see Pittsburgh listed as America's most livable city, but in Pittsburgh, black women are 3 times more likely to die from health complications than their white counterparts. So it is literally unlivable in some cases for our citizens. And so our series looks at racial disparities in all areas of life: health, education, income, incarceration, employment, fair access to affordable housing. And so I wanted to highlight 3 of those events and what we have taken from them. And so with the overturning of Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision last summer, we brought together leadership from Planned Parenthood, the Allegheny Reproductive Health Center, Pitt student leaders on reproductive justice to discuss and share how this overturning specifically impacted women of color and black women in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania. Later in the year, we had an event on education where we brought together a nonprofit called the Pittsburgh Promise, and their work in supporting Pittsburgh public school children in educational success, a political action group called Black Women for a Better Education, and black members of the Pittsburgh Public Schools School Board. And we asked them to speak on the different racial disparities in terms of outcomes and achievement and graduation rates and funding of black students in Pittsburgh public schools, and more broadly, black children in Pittsburgh. The third event was around community safety and security, and we worked with a local school called the Neighborhood Academy, and we worked with 11th graders who were taking a constitutional literacy course with one of our law school faculty. And we helped them design a research project where they would go out into the community and interview their peers, their family members, and neighbors to talk about how they felt about safety and security in their homes and in their communities. And so we taught them qualitative and quantitative research analysis procedures, and we helped them design personal and one-on-one surveys along with interviews. And what came out of that was really interesting. What we found, or what the students found and shared with us, was a recognition that safety and comfortability in one's community was independent of police presence. That safety and security was contingent on the strength of the community and family relationships and how well people knew their neighbors. And that a police presence wasn't their key to safety. And so when we think about the funding of law enforcement and where that money is directed and its claims to security and safety, our children found and our young people found that that was not necessary. So we are thinking about the ways in which to use the knowledge that we've gained from bringing these people together. And one of the things we have done is we have funded 5 advanced students, 3 graduate students doing doctoral work, and 2 law school students doing work this summer around racial injustice and inequities. And we have people at the Public Defenders Project, one person working on differential experiences in school along race, queer black youth experiences in foster care, somebody working at the Education Law Center, and another person working on restorative trauma intervention in schools, and specifically with black children. And so we see this as another opportunity to support excellent work in the ways in which racial disparities happen in our community. We're also working on a community scholar program where we are going to be partnering with 2 of our community organizations to help them do the work that they're already doing. One of the things that I'm sure is not news to everybody is that these great organizations don't often have the resources and the bandwidth to complete all of the work that is required of them and that is asked of them by their constituents. And so we are positioning ourselves to support them in that work. We are going to continue to work with the same school and those 11th graders to develop more of a stronger pipeline where we're going to be collaborating with the University of Pittsburgh undergraduate students and Pitt Law School students to create a more equitable way in which to help people succeed and move on in their education. And so we see these initiatives as ways to lead to greater knowledge and to inform future policy and legal approaches in which a framework of reparations can be built. And so our connections to the UN is thinking about the role of the law in terms of reparations, what is data collection, as my colleague will spend more time talking about, and where and how it is sought out and how it is collected. And most importantly, who are the experts? And so we've positioned our center not to be the experts, but to support the experts. And many of those experts are in the community, and that is where the leadership is. And so I'll end with just saying that the data that we are considering in these types of work is not just a percentage point, but a responsible representation of lived human experience without losing the humanity in that data point or in that algorithm.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be with you all. My name is Ron Adoka. I'm the Associate Director of the Center on Race and Social Problems at the University of Pittsburgh. I also serve as the Associate Director of Honors Education and Social Innovation at the Frederick Honors College. It is certainly my privilege to be with you all. I want to emphasize you being in this space is important, so I am grateful to be in this space with you all. I'm grateful for the efforts that you all are putting towards making our world better for everybody. I wanted to start off by sharing a reflection that has been a guiding reflection in the work that I do across my different roles. This is from Sister Bell Hooks. Quote, "There must exist a paradigm, a practical model for social change that includes an understanding of ways to transform consciousness that are linked to efforts to transform structures." Does that resonate with folks? Right, that what we're trying to do is figure out how do we build our capacity to better understand how we create the world we want to live in. Right, that takes intention, and that's the work that we focus on at the University of Pittsburgh in the Center on Race and Social Problems in our Social Innovation program in the Honors College. A lot of my focus is on how do I build capacity on an individual and collective level for folks to actually think about and advance the world they want to live in. Right, it's not enough for us to talk about it, we actually have to learn how to do it. And through the work that we do, and some of you might have seen the poster boards, in particularly building racial equity consciousness. And we define racial equity consciousness as the dispositions, knowledge, awareness, and skills that empower us to contemplate and cultivate racial equity. What does that mean? Most of us are socialized not understanding the very systems that produce the inequities that we see time and time and again, right? You can find in this country many folks will quickly say, I'm not a racist, but the vast majority of us can't really define racism, right? Because we're not educated on it. And so our goal in the work that we do is to say we need to understand it right down to the roots, right? We need to understand how we've been impacted across all of our systems, the education system, criminal justice system, healthcare system, and we do this work through our Racial Equity Consciousness Institute. As was shared by my colleague, Pittsburgh sits in a region where we have some of the worst racial disparities in the country for a metropolitan area of our size. And I should note, it's not because we have a lot of bad people running around. We got a lot of folks that simply don't know how other people live in the communities that they share. And it's often the case that in many ways we are unconsciously perpetuating inequities, right, through good intentions. And so our focus is to say we need to really understand what does good work look like in this space. And so we built a platform that allows us to learn together across our differences how racism works, so we're in the best position to together build societies and structures that works for everybody. I should note racism is a very solvable problem if you know what you're working on, right? And that's the focus in the work that we do. I should note that we take this work into other spaces, realizing we have to learn how to collaborate across institutions. I don't know how many folks work in universities, but they tend to be some of the most siloed places you can work in. Very, very difficult to get things done unless you're intentional, right? And so that's the work that we do. We try to intentionally build capacity of the members of our institution to do this work because we have some very bright students that want to change things, right? And without proper guidance, right, they often feel frustrated that the institution isn't giving them the resources they need to make the change happen. So that's where we're at. We build capacity for change makers to do the work that they want to do. You'll note that some of that work happens in our Honors College through our Social Change Research Hub. it was mentioned earlier that we have a neuroscientist that's working on a children's book. That book is designed to help young folks better learn about identities across the spectrum, right? Position them in putting them in a position to better value and understand their own personal experiences, realizing a lot of young folks grow up at a very early age learning about bias, even if it's not shared openly, right? And so the way we can intervene is thinking systemically, how do we create new resources, right? How do we begin to think about new models for change that can support that? That's the work that we do with our young folks. I should also note that we are very intentional about working in community. One of the programs that we're going to unveil this year is it's called our Race in Commons platform. As is noted, we have so many experts in the community that simply don't have platforms or resources to elevate the work that we do. The university has convening power. We're going to utilize that to the fullest advantage to bring together those experts to say, this work against addressing racism cannot be done by one institution or one community member alone. We got to do it together. And those people that have the power to bring people together and give them resources to do the work at the highest levels should be advancing that. And so that's what we're doing at the University of Pittsburgh. And I should note, in terms of us just being here, Professor Hansford came to our town last year to really talk about the importance of, again, elevating these issues at a global level. And I immediately said, we have to collaborate. We have to figure out how to work together. You know, he was gracious enough to say, let's find ways to collaborate. And we built this platform that we're going to focus on in partnership with the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center to say, we want to understand how is change happening across the world? Who are the folks that are the agents of change that simply have never had a platform to talk about their work at the highest levels? We are going to research that, put them in one database, and so that the world can learn how change is happening. Too often, we're positioned to only see the negative, to only focus on deficits, not realizing there's so many people that are making positive change happen and they simply have not had a chance to tell their story. And that is our focus in the research that we're going to do. Our goal is to say we want to focus on the people that are advancing narratives, new systems, policies, and practices that speak towards the world we want to live in, right? That we are often bombarded by the media about how things are going wrong versus saying there are people who are doing right. And we need to lift those people up. And so that's what we're focused on. Again, I'm grateful for you all to be here. I'm hopeful that you all take the time to share your narratives with us because we know you're doing great work. And I believe, again, as a collective, we're going to be the change that we hope to see. I appreciate your time. Looking forward to engaging with you all in this process.
I also want to raise up some of our funders that are here, Liberation Ventures. Thank you so much for the work you do to support the cause. We are eternally grateful. So here we will begin. The African American Redress actually formed at a convening held in 2019. We gathered 35 people across the country who are experts in the field, faith-based, civil society agents. And they came up with this concept that we needed to create a collaboration that became a network for people that are working in redress, because as we know, so many communities are engaged in self-emancipatory praxis, and they are their own knowledge experts, and they are forwarding repair for historical harms. I really am honored to always work alongside those communities. I came to Professor Justin Hansford and said, I have this crazy idea, let's create this network. And I'm grateful to you that you said, yes, let's do it. In addition to being led by Howard University, our steering committee has a representation of legacy and reparation organizations and civil society agents with a 6-to-4 ratio majority of such representation to academicians. This structure was designed to place the voices at the forefront of our work. In 2019, we began a 3-year systematic research ArcGIS U.S. mapping project framed within international human rights, a historical continuum to recognize ongoing harms and additional frame within 5 categories of reparations as outlined by ICJ 2005. This project identified 470 efforts in the United States. Since then, we know of approximately 90 more. The network collaborates with local efforts engaged in transitional justice work at the local level. I am not here to speak. We are blessed to have 2 members that are working in communities to talk about the work that they are doing on the ground level and to communicate to you what it is to work sometimes without government-sponsored reparations. So we have Tanya Lewis from Brown Grove, Virginia, and Mariana Barros Titus from Black Broad Branch, DC, and I hand it over to them. Thank you so much for working alongside us.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanya Lewis. I'm a member of the Brown Grove Preservation Group. Brown Grove Rural Historic District is a historically African-American community in Virginia, approximately 95 miles south of Washington, D.C., along Interstate 95. Established during the Reconstruction era by formerly enslaved persons, Brown Grove was initially an antebellum plantation economy marked by hard manual labor to cultivate what was essentially swampland. By the turn of the 20th century, it was a thriving, self-sufficient agricultural community featuring a network of small farms and general stores around the community focal point, a Baptist church, and a schoolhouse. Today, Brown Grove is a 1,200-acre, predominantly African-American middle-class community, many living on ancestral land with the church still its focal point. Last year, Brown Grove was listed on the Virginia Landmarks Register, and on April 27th of this year, Brown Grove was designated a National Historic Landmark. Brown Grove has been targeted for industrialization for decades. In the 1950s and 60s, Interstate 95 was built through Brown Grove on purpose, bifurcating it into two sections. There's a 24/7, 365 major truck stop. There's an industrial air park, a municipal airport, a concrete plant, a 233-acre construction and debris landfill, and now under construction and due to start operations before this summer, a 1.7 million square foot Wegmans grocery distribution center across the road from the church. To put that in context, it's the size of the Pentagon in DC or 30 NFL-sized football fields. It is being built near to and by accounts of elders in the community on the graves of our ancestors. And there's more commercial development that's being considered. Industrialization without representation. Hanover County Commissioners have not represented Brown Grove or truly advocated for the residents' wishes. Decisions have been made and relayed to the community as done deals with no recourse. And regarding Wegmans, the former governor not only courted Wegmans, but approved a $2.35 million grant incentive. The Wegmans site is only the most recent threat, adding to the existing decades-long environmental infractions, injustices, and concerns such as air, water, noise, and light pollution, heavy commercial and personal vehicle traffic, and with Wegmans, the destruction of 20-plus acres of critical wetlands. There is some good news, however, that has resulted from preservation efforts. Now Brown Grove residents are being heard and consulted by county officials to provide input on some matters before decisions are made. Efforts to stop the landfill expansion were successful. One company that wanted to build in the community opted out, given the community's known strong opposition. And in February, the Virginia Supreme Court ruled that Brown Grove residents who sued the county over rezoning should have had legal standing in a decision to rezone land for the Wegmans Distribution Center, sending the case back to lower courts. Brown Grove is no longer the contiguous community marked by folks walking the roads and children playing in their yards or riding bikes down the road. The quality of life that our parents and grandparents enjoyed no longer exists. Many who grew up in Brown Grove no longer want to return to live and raise their families. Brown Grove is not anti-industry. Our contention is that we have been disproportionately burdened. The Brown Grove Preservation Group needs your support to save Brown Grove, to prevent further degradation of quality of life, to preserve its historic and cultural significance, and to uplift the community. As like-minded organizations and individuals, you can help us by donating 3 things: your time, your talents, and/or your treasure. A QR code will be included in the post-event surveys. Please take a look to learn more about Brown Grove. Thank you for listening. Thank you in advance for your support. #Save Brown Grove.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak before you. I really am humbled to represent the Black Broad Branch Project from Washington, D.C. And most importantly, I'm really excited about the opportunity to, as Linda mentioned, showcase the work that can be done at the grassroots level. As was mentioned, my name is Mariana Barros-Titus, and I'm a public historian and community organizer based out of the District of Columbia. I'm here today representing the Black Broad Branch Project, which is a community history project geared towards reparations that is based on Black-owned land in what is current-day Chevy Chase, D.C. Our project has documented the history of a Black community that was known as Dry Meadows in historic Washington County, and we have collected the oral histories of current-day descendants from two families from this community. These two lineages at the heart of our story began in 18th century with ancestors who we typically position as being on either side of the professional and personal life of our country's first president, George Washington. On one side, we have Caroline Brenham, who is the matriarch ancestor of the Brenham-Dorsey-Shorter family. Caroline was enslaved by George and Martha Washington at the Mount Vernon plantation. And on the other side, we have Captain George Pointer, who was born into enslavement and at 13 years old was leased out to George Washington's private company known as the Potomac River Company. By the third and fourth generation of these families in the mid-1840s, they were living as freedmen and women in a rural community rooted on the outskirts of the federal city of Washington. And they benefited from relative freedom predating emancipation even in Washington, D.C. This community of Dry Meadows attained self-sufficiency by cultivating the land and through entrepreneurship. Beginning in the 1890s, the former rural land that surrounded them began to be developed into single-family lots that were intended for white, affluent families, and that were codified through the use of racially restrictive covenants. In 1928, these families, along with the rest of the community, were forced off the land through the process of eminent domain for the purposes of building a white-only elementary school known as Lafayette Elementary School. And while the school is no longer racially segregated, it remains predominantly white because of the legacy of displacement. Our oral history interviews were used to document the intergenerational implications that the displacement from their land had on the descendants of these families. And also, we used those oral history interviews as spaces to think together with our descendants about what meaningful repair means to them. And then we worked a strategic plan from there. Yeah. Out of the strategic plan, we put together recommendations and we built a model that we called the ACE model: acknowledgement, compensation, and education. And the UN Sustainable Goals for Reparations, which we believe are community-centric by nature, can fit into a broader framework under the International Human Rights Framework for Reparations laid out by the International Commission of Jurists and adopted by the UN. Some of the examples that we have under acknowledgement, for example, is working towards having the city government and ideally the federal government who actually governed the land at that time of the displacement to acknowledge that this happened. And that sets the precedent for future action, both for other communities in DC as well as for specific repair efforts that we want to pursue for our descendants. The other category is compensation, in which we're trying to address the material loss and loss of the opportunity to build generational wealth. I want you to understand what it means for descendants from these two families. We have one lineage, the Captain George Pointer lineage, who bears the surname Fisher today. They grew up in public housing in the southeast, which is east of the river. Their forebearers were emancipated before emancipation. They were entrepreneurs. They got the opportunity to build wealth and buy land before in the 1940s, or 1840s, before 1865. 4 generations later, they're living in public housing. And our goal for folks to understand, which is in the 3rd category of education, is that understanding this hyper-local, hyper-individual example and the intergenerational implications that were suffered by these families helps us understand as a microcosm of how the city of Washington was developed as a whole. Because the removal of Black communities for the benefit of white communities, predominantly affluent communities, is an example of how the city of Washington was shaped over and over and over and over again. And so we like to, I guess, encourage all of you to understand the hyperlocal so that you can understand the ways that it fits into the national framework. And at the end of it, if you're not putting the folks who were disadvantaged from the actions that you're trying to seek repair from at the root and at the heart of any of the plans that you're coming forth, those plans are going to come up short. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak to all of you. You know, I like to do this at every opportunity because it's important to name these descendants who were not for our efforts and for their bravery would have very likely been erased from history. So we'd like to thank James Fisher, Tanya Hardy, Jocelyn Julian, and the rest of the descendants from Dry Meadows for the opportunity to talk about their work in this setting and many other settings.